So let's dive into a really bold claim from one particular religious tradition. The idea that it has the definitive answer to one of Christianity's oldest and most difficult questions. We're going to break down the source material here to see how they tackle this huge topic, the fate of the unreached. It really all boils down to this one massive and, let's be honest, morally troubling question. I mean, just think about it for a second. Billions of people throughout all of human history, from countless cultures, who never even had a chance to hear the Christian message. What happens to them? This isn't just some abstract theological puzzle. It's a question that gets right to the heart of what we believe about divine justice and mercy. You know, for centuries, this very question has been a major headache from mainstream Christian thinkers. As our source material points out, the answers have kind of swung back and forth between a hopeful but pretty vague optimism and, on the other extreme, a really unsettling condemnation for people who were just, well, unaware. So the source material really breaks down these traditional approaches into two main camps. On one side, you have the Catholic view, which introduces this concept of invincible ignorance. The idea here is that there's a path to salvation for people who genuinely seek God, but through no fault of their own, never got to know Christ. Then you have the Protestant views, which are more of a spectrum. They range from a really strict exclusivism, which says explicit faith is the only way, all the way to a broader inclusivism, where Christ's sacrifice might cover people more universally. And the reason for all these different answers, well, it all comes from this really profound theological tension, which this next slide just lays out perfectly. So, on one hand, you have the belief in a just and merciful God. I mean, surely he wouldn't condemn someone for something they literally couldn't have known, right? But on the other hand, you've got this very clear declaration from Christ himself that he is the only way. Trying to make both of those truths fit together, well, that's been the central challenge for centuries. And here's the kicker that the source makes. The Bible itself is actually a bit ambiguous on this specific point. And because there's no single, crystal clear answer, no major church council has ever been able to issue a final, definitive ruling. That's why the question has been left in this state of unresolved tension for so long. Okay, so now let's pivot and turn to the main focus of our source material. This is the unique and really systematic answer offered by the Restoration tradition that was founded by Joseph Smith.
The core idea here is called postmortal evangelization. Basically, it's the belief that death isn't the final deadline for hearing the gospel. Instead, the idea is that every single person, no matter when or where they lived, will get a fair, fully informed chance to learn about Jesus Christ and his teachings after this life.
Now, this doctrine isn't just some vague hope. Our source describes it as a complete spiritual infrastructure. Here's how the process is laid out. First, after a person dies, their spirit goes to what's called the spirit world. There, the gospel is preached to all those who never had a chance to hear it on earth. Then, for those who accept it, necessary ceremonies like baptism are performed for them by living church members in temples. This is called work by proxy. And finally, and this is absolutely key, the individual's personal choice, their agency, is always preserved. They're completely free to either accept or reject what was done on their behalf. So, this whole framework is designed to resolve that fundamental tension we talked about between God's justice and Christ's exclusivity. And the claim is that it actually does it without having to compromise on either principle. The source argues this whole system strikes a perfect balance. God's justice is served because everyone gets a fair shot. His mercy is shown by extending that chance beyond death. And crucially, Christ's role as the only way and the need for ordinances like baptism are completely upheld. So, in theory, no core belief has to be thrown out.
Okay, now this is where the source material we're looking at takes things a step further. It actually puts together a kind of comparative scorecard, rating how completely each of these theological traditions answered this one specific question.
Now, it's really important to remember, this scorecard comes directly from the source's author. This is their reading of each view based on its systematic completeness. So, the Latter-day Saint view gets the highest score, specifically for its detailed framework. The Catholic and inclusivist views are seen as merciful, which is good, but they lack a concrete process. And the exclusivist view gets the lowest score because of the really difficult ethical problems it raises. It's definitely a bold way to compare these different systems.
And all of this leads to the source material's ultimate conclusion. The focus shifts from just explaining the doctrine to making a really bold argument about where it came from, presenting it as powerful evidence for Joseph Smith's claims to be a prophet.
The source really frames its whole argument around this one central question. How on earth did a young man on the American frontier in the 1800s with zero formal theological training come up with such a detailed answer to a problem that had stumped professional theologians for centuries? And the author's answer to that question is presented as pretty straightforward. The argument is that this doctrine is so unique and so comprehensive that it serves as strong evidence that its origin wasn't just human creativity, but actual divine revelation. So, as presented in the source, the case for revelation really boils down to three main claims. First, that it solves a nearly 2,000-year-old problem. Second, it's about the quality of the solution. It's presented as being elegant and morally satisfying, not just a quick patch. And third, the argument is that while it feels consistent with little hints in the Bible, the complete system itself was totally new and unprecedented, which suggests it came from an outside source. So, to kind of wrap up the author's main point, in a landscape that's full of theological ambiguity on this very topic, this specific teaching is presented as a total outlier, something that is uniquely rational in its structure, redemptive in its scope, and ultimately revelatory in its origin. And so, that leaves us with this central question that the source material really wants us to ponder. Can an elegant, systematic answer to an ancient problem be seen as a sign of human ingenuity? Or could it be considered evidence of divine inspiration? It's a fascinating case study, for sure, showing how one theological dilemma led to a radically new doctrine, leaving us to weigh the solution against its pretty extraordinary claims.